Dana Hartman Freyer is a woman of amazing courage and inspiration. After graduating from Connecticut College in 1965, she became the assistant to the Afghan ambassador to the United Nations in his capacities both as ambassador and as president of the UN General Assembly. Dana received her law degree from Columbia University in 1971 and practiced law for 36 years. She recently retired as a partner in the firm of Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Floam, where she led the arbitration and alternative dispute resolution practice. She has been widely recognized as a global leader in the field of international arbitration. Dana retired from her law practice to work full-time as the chair of Global Partnership for Afghanistan, a nonprofit located in New York City and Kabul. Dana and her husband Bruce co-founded the Global Partnership for Afghanistan in 2003 to build Afghan farmers' livelihoods. This nonprofit helps farmers develop fruit and nut orchards, timber woodlots, vineyards, irrigation and water management systems, and other on-farm enterprises. It also provides extensive technical and business training which result in increased family incomes, restoration of the environment, alternative income to opium poppy cultivation, stabilization, and security. Dana was named a 2009 Purpose Prize Fellow for her role in restoring Afghan farmers' livelihoods. This national honor recognizes social entrepreneurs who are using their experience, creativity, and passion to take on society's biggest challenges. In 2010, she received the Dr. Jean Mayer Global Citizenship Award from Tufts, an award given to individuals or organizations dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And so we are very fortunate to have Dana here tonight with us. Please join me. She is a woman who can teach us all that one person can, in fact, make a difference.
Thank you, Connie, for that overly generous introduction. And I really can't, I had so many words to say tonight, and I will get to them, but I can't tell you all, I can't find the words to describe how meaningful it is for me to be back here. I only wish that my esteemed professor of government, Marjorie Dilley, who tormented me, but also taught me how to write and think like a lawyer even before I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, if she had been here, and I'm sure if she were here, she would be critiquing every word coming out of my mouth and making it much better. But I'm really honored and humbled to have been invited to address so many distinguished and accomplished alumni and academics at what is really a very extraordinary institution. And it's the place where the seeds that led me to where I am today were planted and nurtured. My friend Jeffrey Sachs challenged this year's graduates at commencement to use their knowledge to make the world a better place. And I'm certain that many of you, I know for a fact that many of you, since graduated from Connecticut College, have been doing just that within your families, within your communities, and even beyond those familiar boundaries. I and other members of the class of 1965, we graduated with a sense of endless possibilities. But then, unlike today, our country seemed more disconnected than intertwined with other countries. There were plenty of injustices and constraints to advancement, confronting women, minorities, the disabled, and others, and the plight of many has improved since then. But regrettably, billions of people's lives across the globe, including in our own neighborhoods, are no better or even worse than ever. And many of the problems that they and we face are inextricably intertwined and seemingly intractable. But it's amidst these problems that lie our opportunities. My Connecticut College classmates, you, our fellow alumni, and millions of others who are, whether just entering the workforce, currently working, volunteering, or in retirement, are or will be the largest, healthiest, longest living, and best educated generation in American history. And so our challenge is to figure out how we can use our precious assets to build a better world, both locally and globally. What, for example, ask ourselves, could we do for youths in schools, communities, and healthcare, for poverty, malnutrition, and the environment, if money and talent were no object? Many of us, of course, want to help alleviate these problems, but we have no idea how to redeploy our experience to do so. We often ignore or undervalue our assets, our networks, and the resources we could apply to meet these critical societal and institutional needs and challenges. And we all know there are seemingly ordinary people who have accomplished what to others seem extraordinary, but to them seems unremarkable because it was just something that they had to do. And I consider myself among those ordinary people. And so I'm sharing with you my story in the hope that it may help you find, as I did, the untapped and unimagined possibilities within you. Hopefully, my story also will give you a glimpse into Afghanistan, the country, and the Afghan people, as contrasted with the Afghan war, which is all the media conveys, and all I'm sure most of you are aware of as happening in that country. In September 2001, I was a partner at Skadden Arps, a large international law firm at the pinnacle of my career. And from my office in Times Square for weeks after the September 11 attacks, I could see the smoldering ashes from the World Trade Center, from what was the World Trade Center. And of course, like others, I mourned the senseless losses of that day and those that followed. But from those losses and devastation, emerged my and my husband's and our two Afghan-American friends' determination to create the Global Partnership for Afghanistan, a nonprofit that empowers men and women in that country to rebuild their lives by restoring their agricultural livelihoods and their devastated environment. The story of how I morphed from lawyer into social entrepreneur, engaged in agricultural development in a country in conflict, actually began here some 4 decades ago. It began with my decision in 1963, during my sophomore year at Connecticut College, to take my junior year abroad in Geneva, Switzerland. As unimaginable as it might seem today, at the time, to our knowledge, there were no precedents at the college for study abroad. In fact, we had to petition the trustees for approval, which happily was granted to the few of us who decided to venture out into the world. And a life-changing year of exposure to students from all over the world, including many from South Asia, lay before me as I studied international law and organizations at the university and at various institutes in Geneva. And what my story and so many like it show is how both the voluntary decisions and the unexpected turns and twists we make traveling the road of life, especially when we take the road less traveled, propel us in directions which lead to unpredicted and unplanned relationships and outcomes, which really make all the difference in our future actions. So after returning to Connecticut College from Geneva and graduating in 1965, I moved to New York City, jobless, sharing an apartment with 2 college friends who are here today. I was determined to work at the United Nations, even if it meant sweeping floors. Instead, through the Connecticut College network, I quickly landed a job as assistant to the Afghan ambassador to the United Nations, who also served as president of the General Assembly while I was working with him. And that remarkable experience and the road trip my husband Bruce and I took in 1972 and 1973 in our Volkswagen Beetle from Germany to Afghanistan and back sealed our love of Afghanistan and its people. Now, like many who visited Afghanistan in the 1970s, my enduring memories were of its hospitable, entrepreneurial, hardworking, yes, poor people, and the green valleys and hillsides that were layered with fruit and nut trees and forests, a far cry from the pictures you see in the media today. In fact, this picture, could you go back, Marge? This picture, which I took in Guldara, where we started our work in 2009, was barren in 2003 when I first returned to Afghanistan. And it's been brought back to life by Global Partnership for Afghanistan farmers and staff. But I'm getting ahead of the story. That is what Afghanistan looked like, many of the valleys and many of the areas in the early 70s when I traveled through the country. Now, you may recall that the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, and at that time, Afghanistan was one of the world's leading producers of nuts and dried fruits. In fact, it had earned the reputation as the orchard of Central Asia. But after 25 years of war, Afghanistan had lost 60 to 80% of its orchards, vineyards, and forests. And in the years following the Soviet invasion, as our Afghan friends emigrated to the U.S. as refugees from the turmoil in that country, my husband and I shared their pain at their country's devastation and at the Taliban's inhumane treatment, especially of women. So it was natural, after the Taliban fell, at a dinner at our home with Afghan friends, that we debated how we could help the Afghan people rebuild their country. We did not debate whether we would do so. It was assumed that we would help without even discussing it. Professor Nadiri and Mohammed Anwarzai, our two Afghan-American friends, and Bruce and I shared a love for the land and its people. But we determined to address needs that others could not or would not meet. My career in dispute resolution had simply prepared me to find solutions to problems. And like the Afghans, I'm an optimist. But their problems did seem insurmountable. The country had been totally destroyed. It lacked schools, hospitals, roads, power, water, governance, you name it. It needed to be rebuilt brick by brick. And how could the four of us, a New York University economist, a former Afghan diplomat, a lawyer, and a rabbi, help? Well, we first conducted a needs assessment. Our research showed that the most pressing unmet need was to help the 80% of Afghans who live off the land to develop sustainable farm incomes so they could feed their families and rebuild their homes. Millions of Afghan refugees and displaced persons were returning to their lands without the means to rebuild the fruit and nut orchards and vineyards and tree lots for timber that had sustained the country's economy for years. And without jobs, education would be of little value and peace would be unsustainable. And so from our ivory towers in mid-Manhattan, we conceived a plan to help Afghans recoup their historic assets, the rural economy, which, by the way, is now the centerpiece of our current government's non-military policy towards Afghanistan. Now, neither I nor any of GPFA's other founders, had any experience with agriculture or rural development. So what did we know? We knew the Afghan people and culture. If our efforts were to be sustainable, we knew we had to listen to them, to partner with them, to respect them, and to learn from them. We knew we needed to staff the Global Partnership of Afghanistan with Afghans and build their capacity to be the trainers and teachers and leaders of their people. And we also knew what we did not know and where we could turn for help. And so in 2003, with having raised about $150,000 from family and friends, Bruce and I and our Afghan advisors met with the Leadership Council, or Shura as it is called, and farmers in Guldara, a district 45 kilometers north of Kabul. Guldara means the Valley of the Flowers. It was where Kabul families in the summer traditionally picnicked, enjoying fresh mulberries and local apples. But in 2003, the road to Guldara was lined not with orchards and flowers, but with rusted tanks, bullet-ridden metal containers, and flags marking martyrs' graves. This was where the Northern Alliance had resisted the Soviets and the Taliban, who in retribution destroyed its homes, schools, mosques, nurseries, and orchards. So when we reached Guldara in 2003, live landmines were still everywhere. Homes were rubble. Schools were tattered tarps over dirt ground, and many we had met lost limbs and family members. But despite their vast needs, the leaders and farmers with whom we had many meetings and drank many cups of tea asked only for help rebuilding their orchards and woodlots and vineyards so they could reestablish productive lives. confirming our own needs assessment. So our hearts were touched and our problem-solving skills challenged. But at the end of the meetings, the leaders of the villages thanked us for coming, but we could see they were clearly doubtful we would return, since so many others had visited them, but none had returned, and we promised we would come back. And the following year, in 2004, we launched our first projects by helping 60 Guldara farmers plant new apple orchards, each with 50 apple saplings. We also hired Hashim, one of our first extensionists, and now a senior member of our staff. Global Partnership for Afghanistan's impact grows daily as we work to reverse instability and hopelessness in Afghanistan by providing farmers with the tree stock and the agricultural business training and the tools they need to revive their farm enterprises. With the help of our now 150 Afghan staff members, of whom I might say 40 are women, no small achievement in that country, 12,000 farmers, including 1,200 women, have now reclaimed their scorched land, planting more than 8 million trees since 2004. And our model has been successful because we rely on local staff in the 12 provinces where we worked. People often ask where we are working in Afghanistan, and I just want you to make it clear. Afghanistan is about the size of Texas, and it has a population of about 30 million people. And when you read about the conflict in Afghanistan, it's generally taking place in the south, in Helmand and Kandahar, which are at the bottom of the map. This map just shows how we've gradually progressed and grown our programs in almost half of the country's provinces. Our support system for these farmer enterprises includes a whole range of activities. We're involved in strengthening university agriculture education because the students and faculty at agriculture universities, especially the regional and local ones, are the future leaders of this sector. We're involved in improving water management efficiency that increases the amount of arable land available for farming. We're empowering rural women to own and manage the same high-value enterprises as men, and to diversify and increase their incomes by establishing beekeeping and poultry raising, vegetable drying, and fruit storage enterprises. We measure our success not just by statistics, though, but by the return of hope and productivity to farmers like Rabia, whose 8,000 GPFA hybrid poplars are now delivering short and long-term income for her family and urgently needed wood for Afghanistan. And by the way, Rabia's poplars were sourced from 40,000 poplar cuttings. They are 6-inch sticks that came from Oregon from a company called Potlatch. And those 40,000 cuttings are now some 6 million trees in Afghanistan and the centerpiece of the hybrid poplar industry. Success is also measured by the little bits of knowledge that can make powerful improvements in farm families' lives. Last year, I met Hamida, mother of 10, in Paktia, a province bordering Pakistan that few NGOs serve other than Global Partnership for Afghanistan. Hamida joined our orchard revitalization program in 2008. Production in her apple orchard was non-existent when our staffer, Sakina, helped her prune her 200 trees. This simple bit of training enabled Hamida that same year to harvest 3,500 kilos of apples, which she sold for $4,000. Before then, her husband's $600 annual income as a taxi driver had been the family of 17's only source of income. Well, her husband, Abdul, who we met, was very proud of her, needless to say, but Hamida still was not satisfied even with this success. She talked about how in the following year her productivity would be even greater. And more significantly, she had seen an underground cold storage facility that GPFA had helped another Paktia woman construct. And so with GPFA's help, Hamida and 15 of her neighbors formed an association enabling them to construct a cold storage facility where they could store their fruit for sale after the harvest season when prices are higher. And these simple facilities that don't require electricity have increased incomes of families by 150% in a single season. Hamida is now the primary support of her 17 family members. But as our impact and reach expands, so does our reputation. Afghans know that we won't pull up stakes, as many development agencies do when conditions become volatile, and repeatedly we're asked to come into new communities. In Paktia, again, one of the more conservative provinces where we work, I met last year Zarguna Himat, a petite woman who is the elected head of the province's parliament, or shura. Zarguna was seated at the center of a large circle of turbaned male shura members. She urged us to expand into Paktia's mountainous districts, where forestry is the backbone of the economy, and she pointed out the window to the barren hillsides, which she said had been covered with pistachio trees. She challenged us also to share the good news about her province and to tell Americans how men and women are working side by side to replant their fields and rebuild the economy. One of her bearded turban shura member colleagues made an even more compelling case for our continued support. For every 50 farmers you help, he said, 1,000 more are encouraged. And we have seen that as villagers' income grow, their opposition to insurgents increases as well. And as farmers learn that they can earn more from tree-based enterprises than from growing poppies, resistance to the Taliban is strengthened in those communities. Although their needs remain enormous, we're inspired by the open arms with which Afghan farmers and staff have embraced our staff and our assistants, and they have leveraged it to ensure success, despite the daily hardships and unimaginable limited means in which they live. And every single day, the Afghans we meet defy the conventional stereotypes that we all hold. The women of Wardak are but one example, and the last one that I'll give you tonight. Earlier this year, 15 rural women from conservative, security-constrained Wardak province south of Kabul traveled to GPFA's Treehouse Training Center in Guldara by bus under difficult circumstances for a 5-day training period to learn what our women farmers were doing and how these women too could become farm entrepreneurs. But it was said that the women from Wardak would not come because they could not travel without male escorts, and the men would refuse them permission to travel. But all of them came, most without escorts, and with our help, they are now replicating in Wardak what they saw, and they're well on their way to defying the stereotypes of Afghan women as subservient and at best secondary wage earners. So in my flashbacks of Afghanistan today, from my many visits since 2003, I don't see a country at war. I see family after family working in the field, replanting, harvesting, and striving for peace, livelihoods, education, better health care, just like we are here. Challenges do abound. The Taliban, corruption, the war. We're seeing there a clash of tradition and isolation with knowledge and progress. And change requires patient investing of knowledge and resources. In the end, however, whether you and I and others are helping the women of Wardak, Hamida, or an abused family or destitute child, or destitute family or abused child, closer to home, our challenge is the same: to enable them to see and embrace new possibilities for their lives, opportunities for education, for livelihoods, and for dignity that were previously unimaginable to them. And I really firmly believe that with all of our skills and resources, if we allow ourselves to cross beyond the boundaries that have thus far defined our lives, we can surely meet the challenge, one person, one family, or one village at a time. I thank you all for giving me the opportunity, and especially the college, to speak with you this evening. And I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have, be it about the situation in Afghanistan or the work of Global Partnership for Afghanistan.